In keeping up with the series of movies that have just about been announced, don't have a trailer yet, but I'm inevitably interested in them anyway, the Sims movie is the next thing coming along. It's real and it's going. With the two highest grossing movies of 2023 being a Margot Robbie movie and a video game movie, is there really any surprise that there's now a project just smashing them both together? Because that's the reality, really. We've got a Margot Robbie Sims movie coming from someone who's directed Loki and written for Doctor Who. I didn't have that on my bingo card. But that's what's kind of happening as this new Sims movie goes into development, courtesy of production company luckychap. Now, luckychap is actually co-run by Margot Robbie, and just so happens to be the company behind Barbie, I, Tonya, and Birds of Prey. Notice who was the star of all of those movies? It seems Margot Robbie herself has her own business, similar to Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, of sort of circumnavigating their own movies. It's a business, I get it. And basically, it's looking very likely that we'll now be getting a Margot Robbie starring Sims movie. And this is interesting because when you get into what kind of story you could do with a Sims movie, it feels like they've literally just done that with Barbie. Like, off the top of my head, the idealistic but externally manipulated and controlled world of The Sims calls for a story of a protagonist escaping the bounds of that world and doing their own thing. Between Barbie and Free Guy, I feel like this ground has been very well trodden, and incredibly recently at that. Further back, you have the obvious comparisons to Truman Show as well. Even the Lego Movie has a bit of this. Nonetheless, I'm willing to listen to what they come up to with this project. After all, they've been trying to do a Sims movie for a very long time. And now that the industry has seemed to have actually learned how to competently adapt these video games into movies, maybe this is the right time to do it. I've certainly popped my head up a handful of times when talking about video game adaptations for movies. In fact, I think a few years back, we did do an exact thing about The Sims. How old was that video now? Like 2-3 years back? Cool, 2020. Oh, time is unrelenting. Even still, it looks to be that this project is very, very different, as even back then I think I had a whole list of cast and characters that would be involved in the story. And it was 3 years ago. Now, why of all things are they doing The Sims as an adaptation? Well, probably doesn't take much to realize, The Sims is in the top 10 highest grossing video games of all time, which translates to movie execs, of course, saying, there's a lot of money to make from something like this. I imagine they're constantly talking with just coins rolling out of their mouths as they do. With The Sims series debuting in 2000, but was actually based on an even older city building PC game called SimCity. I adore the soundtrack to the 2013 game, never played it, heard that was the best decision I ever made. Still, you can see how one thing led to another, but The Sims City was an overhead game where you could plan out the streets and blocks and railways and you name it. You know, it's like City Skylines of these days. Being a create your own for those weird carpet mats everyone seemed to have as a kid, with all the roads and buildings on them. Remember those? Anyway, later down the line, Sims took that concept and zoomed right into the lives actually affected by this godly sitting planning intervention. This was right in the belly of the late 90s and early 2000s. The Tamagotchi had reached its peak, and there was nothing that people loved to do more than trying to keep digital avatars alive like some dystopian virtual ant farm. The Sims was big, and like Grand Theft Auto, haven't had to release a great deal of installments to make their billions. Just a million bloody DLCs that are overpriced even 10 years ago. I mean, we're still waiting for the 5th installment of this 24-year-old franchise, the last of which came out, 10 years ago. So I guess I'm talking about complaints for 15 years ago. Sims 2 is where it's at for me, and I remember boycotting Sims 4 because it didn't have babies back in the day. Like, it just had no features. I still grumble about the downfall of Sims, to be honest. It's EA, you know? The most movie executive gaming studio there is, I would reckon to say. Still, that kind of success from so little installments is something completely unfathomable to the likes of Call of Duty and its 6 or 7 completely muddled sub-franchises that I couldn't care less to follow anymore. Since its release, Sims 4 has received over 70 million players worldwide, with the further 16 million joining the free-to-play release last year, proving that this franchise is still thriving. It doesn't matter that they've spent 10 years just extending the 4th game because people are still lapping it up. So, with that considered, you can see why there's interest in making a movie, and it's not the first time they've tried. Back in 2007, there was an interest in developing a Sims movie. The project was planned to be a live action, but ultimately never made it out of development. But by God, did they try and pull that wounded horse along. That same 2007 project was kept in development for 12 years. until finally getting cancelled in 2019. But it wouldn't stay dead for long, as 4 or 5 years later, it's back on the table apparently. Thank you for making it halfway through this video. As per usual, do check below this video to make sure you are subscribed if you want to keep up on any upcoming animated movie news, as well as movie announcements. There's a bunch of articles that come in. Sometimes there's just not enough information to go off of, but this could be interesting. Poke it while the iron's hot, I say. And if it does come to fully finish, what kind of scenes would you want to see? Do you want them to break the simulation, or simply break the basement to find out there's a prophet goblin in there, stuck in a room with no doors, only to paint for the family? Anyway, tell me your opinions, and let's get back to the rest of it. Of course, while I imagine this will be a live action, this is a completely different project. As mentioned before, Margot Robbie's production company Lucky Chap's developing this one, and their typical approach considered, there's a strong likelihood that Robbie herself will pop up in the movie. According to an article in Screen Rant, the project is likely to take an intellectual approach, exploring themes of self-determination and control. So it's Barbie, that's the plot of Barbie. To be fair, that is an incredibly vague overview of the movie's direction, so that could be where the similarities start and end. However, on the surface, when I read the quote, a more meta-intellectual approach to the subject matter, it feels like both the concept of Sims and the themes that I predicted would be the movie's approach before I even read the article are very similar. But I doubt it would exactly make sense in the Barbie universe if a ladder randomly disappears and someone drowns in the pool, you know? That's gotta be a canon event. If that doesn't happen, this Sims movie is a wreck. Similarly, it could be turned into more of a horror if there is a godly power above rather than just societal sexism. Maybe it could go more in depth in that direction. To be fair, whilst Barbie was definitely meta, you were still absolutely immersed in that ridiculously pink universe, you know? Nonetheless, it does make me think that Barbie's lit the beacon for all these IPs to now shroud their projects in a degree of critical self-awareness to disguise the fact that they just want to sell toys and video games. And though in its current form as just a vague, clouded idea, this seems like just Barbie done with a little green plumbus above its head. Perhaps it's an animated project. The Sims looks awfully animated, and maybe it would work like that. Just make 3D CGI Margot Robbie instead. Then I could actually cover it as a review and it would fit with my branding. Please? However, all these concerns aside, there is some interesting behind-the-scenes talent attached. Reportedly joining as director is Kate Herron. For those unfamiliar, ahead of the big thing she's done, she has contributed to Sex Education, Daybreak, and even some upcoming Doctor Who seasons. However, most will recognize her work on the Loki series. Despite Marvel's so far lackluster run of the 2020s, Loki is what many consider one of the few W's the studio has had since Endgame. And considering the external authority overseeing the timeline premise of Loki, you can perhaps see why there's some crossover with the matter. Loki's take on this kind of premise is also quite distinct from the more Barbie free guy approach, so that may work in the Sims movie's favor. I have no idea whether she's writing as well for the project, but her addition to the project is certainly a positive one. Not to mention, of course, this is also an ideal time to be working on a video game project. As we opened with, the other big office hit of last year was the Mario movie. Whilst The Last of Us absolutely swept up the reviews and awards for being a genuinely excellent series based on a video game. The Sonic movies in many ways kicked off this whole era and have also been doing very well for themselves, with both a third movie on the way and a high-budget Knuckles series coming out in a couple of weeks. Yes, there's also been things like Uncharted and Halo. People aren't too hot about those, but they did it anyway. The beacons are lit, and now we have a Fallout series in a couple of weeks, and a Borderlands movie in just a few months. Beyond 2024, there's the next Super Mario movie in development, reports of Zelda and God of War also coming. It's just, there's a lot of video game stuff coming out, and considering video games have often been a kind of quiet, popular, open secret child of great storytelling in the ways that movies have run very deep into the ground, it's nice to get something vaguely interesting, original, and new. Even if it's treading over the same themes as what Lego Movie did, what Free Guy did, what Barbie did, and anything else vaguely meta, it's slightly, faintly new. At the very least, it's a new format, and maybe it can breed originality from there. The whole concept of Sims is you write your own story for this cast of characters, so really, the idea of Sims at all as a movie can go in a lot of different directions. There's not much that the game actually gives you unless it focuses in on the Goth family, and that's a whole lot of family drama in its own right. Can't wait to see a man abducted by aliens and come back pregnant. God, I miss Sims 2. I have a feeling this could go either way. It will get a massive success, but depending on the prompt that it tries to roll out with, it could very easily, quickly burn itself out. But I'm excited nonetheless. Last time we talked about Sims, it was all being helmed under Legendary Pictures, and this seems to be entirely fresh and new. And with some new perspectives, maybe it can breed new innovation. How will this modern Sims movie fit into this modern era? In the state of the industry as it is? We'll see. For now though, I will end it off there. My name's been Daz. Thank you for making it to the very end. Let me know your thoughts on a Sims movie. I got a lot of comments when I mentioned it 3-4 years ago of people saying, why is this a thing? Please do it with the drowning pool scene. But what else would you like to see? Would you like to not see this at all? Do you think it's just a Barbie clone? Or what canon events do they have to do in the weirdest, most abstract forms of Sims storytelling? I'd love to know your thoughts, to think back on the good old Sims days. One day maybe we'll see Sims 5 in our lifetime. And hope this time it comes with teenagers part of the game, huh? Anyway, on that note, I shall see you in a little bit.